pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. This will be a somewhat abbreviated City Council meeting because we will need to go into the informational portion with regard to the Historical Preservation District as close to 7 o'clock as we can. But let me get started as soon as I can find all my stuff here. For those who didn't know, we just came out of a study meeting, work session. That's why we're scrambling around. I don't know how many times I've told council members, do not bring open containers of liquids. I'll call the meeting to order. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
I move we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, nay. With regard to the consent agenda, Janet, do you wish to speak to the item that was added?
The amount changed from the original amount that you got on the warrant because the bill came in for a work comp claim that I needed to get paid, so I thought I'd throw it in for tonight's meeting. So the total that's on the agenda that you have in front of you now is correct with the $298,641.02.
So with regard to the items on the consent agenda, anyone have any questions with regard to any items you'd like to pull out and ask about? If not, I would move the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Amy Smith,
Sorry.
second.
Yeah.
Discussion? Go ahead.
I had one question. On page 4, there was uniform commercial clothing, hoodies, pants, and jackets for like $4,600. What is all that? I mean, is that
It's the electrical department.
electrical, the FR stuff?
Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Approval of the consent agenda. We really don't have much on tonight's agenda for public comment. If anybody had anything they wanted to talk about, that's really would have to be the conditional use permit for the office area behind the county building out on the north side of town. Anybody want to say anything about that? If not, then I'm going to move on to that, and that go to James Masters.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. So at the last Planning Commission, the CUP conditional use permit was approved, okay? Member Hake moved to recommend the request for the CUP be approved with the following conditions. All right, that Marion County will work with the City of Marion Building Inspector on any of the projects that would be coming up on this property. The CUP will be withdrawn if Marion County sells said property or changes the usage or fails to comply with the conditions. And 3, the county agrees the parking lot will be used only for passenger vehicles and small trailers. Lou second that motion. In favor 5, opposed 0, motion carried. That was their recommendation to the City Council on this conditional use permit.
So at this time, then, James, are you recommending that or asking the council to weigh in on that, either approve it as recommended or send it back for modification if we see a need or something?
Correct.
Okay. Thoughts, comments, questions?
We were pretty thorough in it in their discussion. They did their business on it, but it seemed pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah. With regard to the caveats that Russ Hake put on it, I guess the fear is that they'd be parking big county dump trucks or something on it?
Correct, or
Okay.
equipment.
Okay. And then, what were some of the others?
That they were wanting to put some building out there and do other little things, you know, storage for lawnmowers and stuff like that, you
Okay.
know, which they can do that. you
And
know.
that's part of within the recommendation?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that they
As
work
well as,
with.
I believe, a storm shelter possibly.
Yeah, storm shelter, some electrical things, lighting, better lighting for at night, you know, which would require electrical inspections and stuff.
And they're not looking to pave that, right? They're just gonna gravel it?
No, they're not gonna pave that. They're just gonna gravel it. They're actually gonna use the culvert. The property right beside them is, owned by the county also. It has a culvert there already on the back side, and then over on the east side, there's another culvert there. So there's a culvert on the north side and on the east side, and they plan to use those culverts to access his properties. So no more new culverts or anything like that.
You're usually good for a question, Kevin. Nothing? So you're looking for a motion to approve at this time? Motion to accept the recommendations and adopt them, right?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Now, any other discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Ayes have it unanimously. And then we're back to you again, James.
Hopefully you guys had a chance to, y'all had a chance to review the, little tidbits I put in the packet there, a little letter that I gave you guys, on this here. We have a troublesome property. Our typical method of service, would be certified letter, personal service. Okay, and then we can consider it served, and we can go to court, and we say, you were served with this violation notice, and then proceed on down the line. The people live in Colorado Springs, so there's no way to go personal service. They did not pick up their mail.
I expected you to ask for permission.
Oh. Well, the city attorney did recommend.
70 cents a mile.
That's 70 cents a mile, yeah.
So, anyway, the city code says that the council can, have it served a second way. Now, you know, granted, the city attorney says that I could serve this here, but it could be drawn up, well, the council was supposed to serve this here, so it could be dealt. What the city attorney says, he didn't want to get in the courtroom and you know, there'd be an argument saying that, well, you wasn't delegated to do that service. It was the city council that was supposed to do the second serving of this here. So that's kind of what I'm asking for tonight, is a motion to delegate me to have the means to do the second service by door hangers, posting notices, personal notification, telephone calls, or first-class mail. And now, that way, if they refuse to pick up their first service, certified mail in Colorado Springs, I can send them a regular mail and go down and post a property, and then they'll be considered served. And I can take those minutes from the meeting and then just hang on to those if it ever came up in court.
It doesn't change us as being the governing body that's in charge of doing it. It's just we're delegating you the authority to carry it out
Correct,
and have it in writing showing that.
correct.
I think the city attorney is being hyper cautious, and that's not a bad thing. Because I, very rarely is when like for instance, when I was with the court system, you know, the chief judge was supposed to make sure that A, B, and C happened. Well, the chief judge didn't go do it. It was delegated to either the court services chief or the court administrator or whatever. So that's pretty common stuff. But haven't been working with that stuff, and if the city attorney thinks it would be helpful to be double safe, no harm, no foul, as far as I'm concerned. Mark? thoughts, anything?
No, we talked about it, I agree with it. I might make a note of clarification. Were you working with city attorney or city prosecutor?
City
Okay,
prosecutor.
yep,
Correction on
partners.
that. Yeah, city
Yeah.
prosecutor, Zach Strella.
Yeah. That's a good point, city prosecutor.
I just have a question. I know you have to have a paper trail pretty much for everything you do. How does that work then with the telephone conversation? Like, do you just record everything that it was?
Yeah, I would just
Are you gonna-
document it in my notes.
Yeah, okay.
I keep a daily journal to keep track of things like that there, so
Okay.
that I can go back and say, well, I know what I did on this day.
Yeah,
Is the writing in yellow that you had shown us, that's just being added on to what's currently there?
Yeah, that would be basically the motion
Added
to
second.
delegate, that I could serve the second notice by what's highlighted in yellow there.
Well, I would move that we would accept the changes to the City Code, Chapter 8, Article 6 of Environmental Code, delegating the NSD, Neighborhood Service Director, the authority to carry out the said service.
The second notification,
Notifications.
second service, yes.
I do think it's important that we make sure that we understand, we're not saying that that's all we have to do in the way of notice. That's the backup.
right.
Yes.
Try the more direct method first.
The first method, certified personal service, is the first way of contact.
Is there a second?
A second.
Further discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? Ayes have it. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No,
You've been a pretty busy guy.
I have. No doubt about that.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, okay, yeah.
No, we're running ahead of, I can't
Are
believe it.
we
We're
ahead
actually-
of schedule?
We are, yeah.
Okay, so I would just give a quick update on the dangerous structures and stuff. So things have gone very well with the 5 that we selected for city court, and I've had contact from 3 of them, and they all have a plan in place. And haven't heard from 2, but one's probably just going ahead and take care of it. I probably won't even hear from them on a shed. The 10 that were selected for possible resolutions to hold a hearing, I heard from the first one, that was Walton State Bank. I heard from them today. So, actually just got those mailed out at the end of the week last week. So I figured my phone would blow up today, but that's going to be tomorrow.
One thing that Mark and I have talked about a little bit, James, is obviously I am personally in favor of, I don't like the word aggressive, but I guess being enthusiastic or whatever in terms of requiring people to maintain their property at least up to that minimum standard. No, we're not telling anybody you can't leave your kid's trike in the yard or whatever, but
Correct.
when it gets to the point that it's a problem for your neighbors and so on, then that's when you live in a city. It's different than living out in the country or whatever. But because we are being a little more enthusiastic with it, I think that some public education is helpful. So that's what Mark and I talked about, was that when you identify an area that probably needs to be addressed, that we start with a letter or a visit or something that's fairly non-aggressive, but yet indicates, hey, here's where we are, and then go to the next step when they don't take care of it. Does that make sense at all?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, my fear is that if just out of the blue, like if you never ever made your kid clean their room, and then you just walked in one day and threw all their toys out the window and said, well, they at least need somebody giving them a few warnings before that happens. That's where I'm coming from. And I know that happened to Amy, so.
I would do that. Watch out, kids.
That prompt any questions or discussion on anything?
No.
And I feel like you are doing that. You give plenty of warnings and give them plenty of time to correct the situation before, going
Yes.
the more, as you say, enthusiastic route.
The notice I sent out last week was a notice that they were in violation with their structures, okay? That on April the 21st, I would be coming to you guys for a resolution to hold a hearing, okay? They have that time between now and then to do something with their structure, and then even up to the point of the hearing, I'm sure the hearing date will be another 60 days on down the line for the resolution, because it'll have to be posted in the paper and mailed, certified mail to them and stuff. So, they're looking at 120 days before we actually ever will get to a hearing on this here. And I did notify some others that about their structures, that there's no action at this time on their structures, but that we...
Okay, so give me an example of how did you do that? Just talk to them?
I sent them a letter that we were aware of their structures, but at this time, we're not going to take any action. But if there's any, that in the future this could be revisited again.
So in essence, it's saying the city has noticed that your detached garage is in disrepair at this point?
Yes,
Yeah, that
possibly,
could- okay.
possibly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and just let them know that we are aware that there could be some issues there, but at this time that we're not pursuing anything on it. But that doesn't mean that we won't in the future.
That's really that's where I was going,
Mhm.
is obviously if, this house is about to fall down, it's gonna kill somebody, that's a different thing. But
Yes.
if it's something that, we can give them a heads up without actually writing them up,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay. That's what I like. Thank you, sir. Public forum, anything anybody wants to say about anything? I bet I know what you're gonna talk about.
I want you all to know, I ordered this weather.
Last week,
Yep, after last week, I ordered this weather. Just one short briefing on the airport. Our last airport board meeting was the 29th of last month, and the hot topic item was our no fuel situation. And Mark had mentioned last month, I think it was the last meeting of last month, that Darren Neufeld is working on several KDOT grants for us, for the airport. And I believe one of those
We'll
grants...
submit it. Yeah,
it's
one work
it's
for a
submitted.
fuel station, comes in on
Yeah.
bids. And at an airport meeting, Darren felt pretty positive about it.
Right, right.
So we're hopeful to hear that in the next several months, we hope.
So anyway, May the 6th of last year, our fuel pump out at the airport was put out of service. It was found to have 2 major leaks, and we was basically put out of service. So I was asked by the board to come in tonight to this meeting to see if we could maybe source a fuel pump, a used fuel pump, and a meter, gallons meter, that could be put on that island out there at the airport, fuel island.
The only couple things, I think if we can do it, we need to find out how to do it. The fuel, we have to check some other things, if the fuel in there good and all that, I don't know.
Yeah.
But we
I
can-
did check with Becky earlier today, and she said that the last fuel drop out at the airport was in September 9 of 2022.
Yeah,
So
And
that fuel is getting kind of old out there.
Yeah.
Avgas will actually store longer than car gas, but even it has its limits.
As I recall about Hatfield, the thought was earlier this year, you could fill it up and it would still be okay, but I
Yeah.
don't know anymore. We need to check that out.
Yeah. Well, there's roughly, I checked the fuel out there, the gauge on that west tank, and there's roughly 300 gallons in that tank.
Okay.
So.
How
and
big's the tank?
It's, I believe it's 1,000-gallon tank.
Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
1,000-gallon
You
tank.
could dilute that with
Yeah,
new stuff.
yeah.
And that might be something we could do until we find out about the grant.
So
Yeah.
when we first talked about this, I know that there was, I don't remember what it was, maybe it was that kind of a stopgap measure that was discussed. But the grant was for what? A new pump? I
A
mean,
whole new fuel system.
Yeah, a whole new fuel
Yeah.
system, yeah.
okay, and that,
So the board talked about that. I think you had two things going. One, that's the ultimate. If we get that funded, that would be the perfect solution. I think Buck's talking between now and at that time.
Right.
yeah, well, I understand that,
Yeah.
yeah. But what's new about that system? I mean, you're talking new tank, new, what?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know all that.
These brand-new fuel systems are pretty cool. The tank, the pump, the tank, the hose reel, the credit card reader is all on, it's actually mounted on a skid, steel skid. And it's all one unit, basically. And there is no underground piping or anything like that.
Wow,
So I think the answer is everything is new
yeah.
if we get the grant.
Yeah, everything is new, yeah.
And as I recall, again, this is off memory. I think Darren, and he'll be here a little bit later. I think it was a 90-10 grant out there or something
Yeah,
like that.
it
I
was
think all
90.
those KDOT
Yeah.
grants are 90/10,
Yeah.
or the aviation, KDOT aviation grants.
But you don't have, do you? I know, Zach, you've worked with Darren for a long time, but are those, like, do we know that, okay, they make that decision in May of every year, or?
I'm not
is
sure
it-
off the top of my
I
head.
think,
That'd be a
I
Darren
think
question.
probably April, May. And, again, Darren highlighted to the board the level of what's important to him, and that did seem to rate toward if there's no fuel at the field, we're very hopeful that will score well.
So what's the timeline if, let's say it's May, and you find out, yep, we got it? What's the timeline from then?
I'm not sure that.
Before-
See, that's
when
what
Darren
our
gets
worry,
here.
that's what our worry is
Yeah.
on the board, is that if we do get the grant, that'd be great. But we could still be looking at a year or two, prior to getting that, system out there.
I don't know if it'd be
So-
quite that long, I guess it
Yeah.
could be. I would hope by the end of the year you have a new fuel system. That could be very optimistic. We need to verify that.
Okay, so
We'll
that's
verify.
kind of what I needed. You're thinking that it would be optimistic to think we'd have it before 2026?
I'm very hopeful, yeah. I mean, I don't know for sure. I would like to think, I'm guessing with on different grants I've worked with them on, they'll announce it, you have to sign some forms, you have to go through a little bidding process, and then you have to have it installed. I just think that's probably a 6-month process right there.
So what's bad out there now? Is it just the dispenser itself or the pump unit or the?
Yes, it was the actual fuel pump was undergoing a calibration process, testing process. And during that process, that's when it was found to have these 2 leaks. The hose is completely shot, dry rotted and split open. And the actual suction pump that is down in the cabinet of the pump housing was just spraying fuel all over the place. So that's why we was put out of business.
Yeah. And Buck, we're at the same meeting, correct me if my memory's wrong. As I recall, the thought was, we had a couple of bids. It seemed like just for the fuel alone was like $10,000 to $12,000. So you had these additional things.
Yeah.
So the thought was, let's try to get the new whole system. Because with the money we'd have to put into that grant would be probably less than we'd have to do to fix that. That's the thought process. In the meantime, Buck correct, we haven't had fuel, which is not a good thing.
Yeah, that, we was put out of business on May the 6th. And on May the 20th, we did get a quote to put a new pump in, turnkey project, but it was like $12,547 for just a basic fuel pump. And we thought that was just kind of outrageous pricing.
Was it a new one or was that a
That
used
brand
one?
new one, yeah.
So, are you guys willing to look for a used pump, or were you asking us to
That's
do
what we
that?
would like to do. We would like to go ahead and start looking for one, a used pump. And if we could find one, I guess then work with Mark
Yeah.
to see if maybe we could get it
And I'll
purchased.
get some more, at the next meeting, we'll have an update. I'll talk to Buck and his folks, and also talk to Darren. Answer some of your questions.
I will say that it's on more than one thing, and I'd like to find a bad guy, but I really don't think there is a bad guy, but they have been waiting, including the door on his
Yeah,
own hangar.
it's been a struggle.
So I appreciate the patience, but I have no problem with, checking out, see what we can get one for. I would assume if we get one and it works, then we can use it till we get, hopefully, the new system, and then maybe we can sell it to somebody else.
How many
Yeah.
dollars worth of fuel is 300 gallons of that type
There's,
of fuel
yeah,
sitting
the
there?
fuel is running $5.80 a gallon right now. So, and we've got roughly 300 gallons plus or minus in that west tank out there. So that's pretty good chunk of change.
Now, if you guys on the board would be willing to volunteer, certain times, we could get a long hose, put it down there and let you siphon that stuff.
Get one of those hand pumps.
Yeah, okay.
Start hand pumping it out. Okay, that's all I had,
Yeah,
everybody.
I don't hear anyone that has an objection to exploring that option.
Okay.
And Mark's your contact guy.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go back, and I don't know if we're gonna have an airport board meeting this month or not, probably not, but we'll have one in March for sure. So I'll go back to the guys and say we just need to start looking.
Sounds good.
So-
Thank you.
Okay, thanks all.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public forum? All right, anything departments? Let's go down to you, Tim, for the council.
I do not have anything to report on tonight.
Kevin? Just noting that we just got out of the study session, work session. I thought it was a good session. I thought it went well. Talked about a lot of things that are exciting and some that are scary. Zach?
I don't have anything.
Don't have anything?
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that.
Motion and second, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it unanimously. So, coming up here, hopefully real quickly, we will have Mr. Ben Moore here to talk about the Historic Preservation District project that we are proposing.
We'll move to the back,
Right. I'm going to sit back there.
So, we're a team on this project, so I'm just the guy who sold it a little bit. But Taylor and Christy, we work collaboratively together on all these projects that we do. So you might see Christy, or you might see me, or you might see Taylor working on these things, and we all work together. And lots of experience in the room, and we've done this several times, and we think we can show you why it helps small communities. It gives a tool in the tool bucket for redevelopment. And I think you need about 10 tools, but this is just one. And that's the first step, though, and it's a great way to start this. Do the down arrow. There we go. All right. So, Christy, it's some of these terms that,
These are really tiny, so I'm glad people have printouts. I'm Christy Davis. I grew up in Harvey County, so forgive me, right down the road. I live in Chase County. I've worked in every county in Kansas. I've worked with Ben on a lot of projects for at least 20 years now.
we
Before
both
we
have
had
gray hair now.
Before we had gray hair. And I've done quite a bit of work in Marion County, including Marion, Hillsborough, and Florence and Peabody. I guess all your main communities here. So I appreciate the opportunity to provide some information and answer any questions. I worked with Benmore Studio on a downtown survey, and it was really kind of inspired by the work that Randy's done. He may never forgive me for not returning his texts. But, inspired by the work that he was doing at the time. And at that time, you know, we did a lot of civic engagement at that time, but it's been a while. It actually was pre-pandemic.
Yeah,
So
we look back, 2019, that seems like
Yeah.
eons ago.
it does now. I mean, yeah, 5 years, a lot has changed since then. And one of the things that has changed, at that time, you know, we had, you know, prepared this survey. We made recommendations for a district. Great. We didn't proceed with that as a community, but since then, about 3 years ago, we got legislation passed in the Kansas legislature that increases the rehab tax credit for rural communities. Any community under 9,500 gets an enhanced credit. So Mark has a lot of experience in Emporia. We worked on a lot of those projects. Right now, they're getting a historic tax credit of 30%, a state credit. For communities under 9,500, it's 40%, which makes a huge difference. In addition to working with Ben on a lot of these projects, I hired Ben to work on some of my projects. So my husband and I own the laundromat in downtown Cottonwood Falls, and I own an old bank building in Council Grove. Ben was our architect on those. Needless to say, we did not have the 40% tax credit yet, and those have been fun hobby projects for me. We call them businesses, but anyway, they meet a community need, and they were buildings that were threatened, and in particular with the laundromat, it was something that was identified as a need. So these incentives make those kinds of projects possible. You have a sheet that has some terms on it. You know, we throw around a lot of words: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, lots of words. In general, we call it, you know, preservation. When we're working in downtowns on buildings, we're often doing what we would call rehabilitation, which is making sure you're not preserving the building to be the White House or some, you know, internationally known landmark. It is rehabbing the building for a current use. That's most of the work that we have done.
Turning something that used to be a bank into apartments is a good example of that. You know, changing that, and you got to modify lots of things in it to make it work. New HVAC, new wiring, life safety things.
Right, so there's this recognition that these buildings aren't museum pieces, that there's value in them if you can continue to use them. Okay, so that's most of the work that we do.
From a city's perspective too, when you reuse something, you guys don't have to put in new water lines, new sewer lines, they're already there. So when you have to extend those out, that's a lot of dollars. So it's a great way to be fiscally responsible as a city.
So this is a quote government program. We keep talking about tax credits in particular because that's why a lot of downtowns have pursued listing of downtown historic districts is to qualify for this funding. It's been around for over 20 years. It was the first thing I did in my first grown-up job was to create this program, and since then there's been about $1 billion invested in historic properties in Kansas because of the program. We mentioned, you know, here we throw around these acronyms because I don't like them either, but when we talk about SHPO, it's State Historic Preservation Office. We're going to show you some examples of inventory. We want to show you the work that we did for the survey in 2019 that is the basis for any possible historic district nomination. And then I'll define kind of what a historic district is, because I don't know that everybody, if you haven't worked with them, you may not know.
It's all weird terms, and we've just found it's helpful to put some of those on paper so you guys can understand what we're talking about, because it's Greek,
So
basically.
what often happens in downtown, you have like a keystone building, right, in your downtown, and it may be listed on the National Register on its own, because it has, it meets a lot of requirements as far as it's got historic integrity, it's eligible because it's a great example of a particular kind of architecture, or it's historically significant for the development of the community. Not every building, though, in your downtown is eligible for individual listing. And so historic districts are one efficient way to look at an area, like a commercial business district or downtown, and identify within that area properties that would contribute to a historic district. And that means that they would qualify, for funding. So in a downtown, you might have a building that was built in 1980, wouldn't contribute to a historic district, but you might have 50 properties within a boundary, and 45 of them are contributors, meaning they're over 50 years old and they meet some integrity requirements. Those are the properties within a district then that would qualify for funding without listing every single building separately.
Basically, in a nutshell, what a district does too, it saves those individual property owners quite a bit of dollars, because then they don't have to hire somebody as smart as Christie to write that up individually, and it's a lot of work. And so what the attempt is here is to do it for the whole district, and it makes the threshold a little lower since you're doing a whole district. And it just makes it a lot simpler, and then it's easier for those, a small project or a large project too that happen. Yeah.
Well, one of the terms on there was nomination. So when we talk about a historic district nomination or a National Register nomination, that's the paperwork that you fill out to get a district or a property designated. So that's what we're talking about with that. We, in 2019, did a lot of survey work. Obviously, that needs to be updated. But we did a lot of kind of prep work, but did not prepare an actual nomination. Talked a little bit about how districts might have a number of properties. Some of them are contributing, some are non-contributing. That gives you an idea. Again, you got a building that's under 50 years old, it's not going to be a contributor to the district. Talked a little bit about historic tax credits. Tax credits are an interesting topic. Some of you may be familiar with the community service credits, and there's some other tax credit programs. With the rehabilitation tax credits in Kansas, our programs in Kansas are the envy of the country when it comes to historic preservation. A rehab tax credit is, it's allocated based on an ownership percentage. So if you do a $100,000 project in a downtown building and you're in a community under 9,500, you can qualify for a tax credit equal to 40% of your qualified expenditures. So on a $100,000 project, you get $40,000. Most of us don't have that kind of state tax liability, but the great thing about this program is that these historic tax credits are transferable. You can sell them to people who have the tax liability, banks, insurance companies, etc., and then use that money to leverage your next project. Anything else on that?
I don't think so.
Go ahead.
So kind of the process to get a district nomination, the first step you guys did in 2019, which was an initial survey of the potential buildings and that type of stuff. We'll go through that a little more in detail. But the next steps, which takes about 12 to 18 months, depending on how you guys decide to progress through the process. First thing is having a public meeting. So the desire always, from the state's end of things, is to have property owners engaged in the process, to make sure they want to have a district and to understand what that means. It's real important. Then we'll have a meeting with SHPO, again one of those terms, the Historic Society, to talk about the boundary. We're going to talk a little bit about the boundary tonight and kind of get your guys' input and what we did in 2019 about the boundary. But SHPO has a role in that. Ultimately, they get to say yes, no, maybe so, type of thing. And so we'll go through that, and then we'll update kind of the inventory, I mean, look at the buildings again, hey, what's changed since 2019, what hasn't, those type of things. And then we'll draft the nomination and submit a draft to the state. They'll send back feedback, say, no, we want to change X, Y, and Z. We'll hold another public meeting during that process too. And then we'll submit a final to the state, and then it goes to a board for review. That's kind of the nutshell of the process. So we're still at the beginning, trying to get your guys' input, which is a big part of this. Okay.
All right, well, in 2019, as we said before, we did a survey. Some of you may remember us walking around and taking pictures downtown. We were looking at a commercial, business area. So we were trying to survey everything within your kind of central business district that generally had a commercial purpose. Okay, so we may have touched on a couple of residential properties, but this shows, it might be better in your handouts, but you can see the boundary in downtown, the area that we surveyed in 2019. So it was pretty comprehensive. We were looking at everything we could see in downtown that would fall into a commercial, might fall into a historic district. Next slide. This next slide, we talked a little bit about this idea of when you survey buildings, you classify them as either contributors or non-contributors to a district. This is a map, and again, this needs to be reviewed and updated, but it shows kind of the parcels that are dark. Those are parcels that have properties that would be considered contributors to the district.
So the big deal to that, again, from the dollars later, that we'll look at it on example is you can get tax credits for a contributor. Non-contributor, you can't.
With some exceptions, and Ben's going to show you a really great project. The Gun Den, remember that building? All right. The Gun Den in Euphoria. Is it still the Gun Den? It's something else now.
No,
There's no Gun Den anymore?
There's not. It's
Wow.
a doctor's office.
Okay, all right. See, I'm so behind. But that place was there for a long time.
The new doctor's office is really cool.
Yeah, we have pictures instead of, yeah. But as far as contributors and non-contributors, I mean, it may be because your building is fewer than 50 years old. It may be that somebody put a, aluminum facade on it, did something that would affect the integrity of the building. So there are times when those things are reversible, and if you reverse them, you can turn a non-contributing building into a contributor.
Yep.
And I want to say too, the way this map, the way we identify boundaries of a historic district is we survey a really broad area, we see where the contributors and non-contributors lie, and we try to create kind of a concentrated area of contributors, because if you've got a boundary and everything around the edge is a non-contributor, they're going to want you to narrow down that area anyway.
And you can, I know there's discussion about trying to change the boundary a little bit. This was the feedback we got in 2019.
Yeah.
And so I suspect that's what the state will want, but we want to get your guys' input on that as well.
And it's pretty common, like where we'll have a historic district and somebody, they got a house right on the edge of it and they want to be included. Well, it's a downtown district. It's a commercial business district type of district. You can't really justify like grabbing a house here and there without some justification. So. Go ahead. All right. So this is the love acronyms, KHRI, Kansas Historic Resources Inventory. It's an inventory of every building that's ever been surveyed in the state of Kansas. And there are what, a couple 100,000 by now?
Oh, it's
More?
phenomenal. Yeah.
So when I started, it was less than 50,000, so we've done some work. But we have been surveying with federal dollars mostly in Kansas. We've been surveying historic properties since the late 1960s. Obviously, there's been a lot of change since then, and properties have come and gone. But this is the state's kind of database of everything that's been inventoried. You can go online to KHRI, and you can find lots of properties, but you can see everything that we've done, because when we did the survey in 2019, we uploaded it to that database. So photos, mapping, You'll see, see that really long paragraph. We did an architectural description and a history of each of these, or preliminary history of each of these as part of that project. That's all in a database so that folks can access it.
And that was all part of that initial survey we did, so you guys anybody can access that.
So the difference between that and kind of moving to an actual district nomination is the nomination part, and surprise, surprise, it's another government form.
Yeah.
When you write a National Register nomination, whether it's for an individual property or a district, there's generally two main parts to it. A description, so like a narrative description of the building or the district, and then a history. So with a historic district, what we'll look at is we will write a summary history of the community, right? And how downtown developed over time as a whole. And then for each property, whether it's a contributor or non-contributor, we'll write an architectural description and a history of that property. And then on here, there's information about the address, the date of construction, try and get everything in one place, in one document. And then we put mapping with that too, and then photographic documentation. These nominations go to, in every state, they go to a state preservation office. Those are offices that are funded through state dollars, but also federal dollars as well, through the National Historic Preservation Act. They review them at the staff level, and then they go to historic sites to a board of review. In the case of districts, the goal is, so if you have a district and you have 10 property owners, okay, and 8 of them are adamantly opposed to the district, and they can file, they can file an objection, and that can tank the whole thing. The idea is you really want most of the people, the majority of people within that area, to be supportive of the project moving forward.
So why would people be supportive? Because there's some cool benefits, and those are the tax credits, the federal and state historic tax credits. There also is some local control. If you've got a property owner and they want to do something, and the SHPO says, hey, no, you can't do that, the city council can override that. And they can say, yes, they can in Marion. You do not ever have access to the historic tax credits on that project then. Other people's money, other people's rules. That's the thing to remember on that. That is what it is, but there is local control. And I've seen that used in Emporia several times, Council Grove. It just happens. There's certain things that somebody locally wants to do, and it's a great thing that our state allows. So it's a big deal. But it's always important to know you do have local control. So we talked about the 40% of the QRE, which, so not every dollar that you spend on a building, and you've probably explained this thousands more times than I have.
When we say qualified rehab expenditures, so the way the tax credit program works is it identifies some things as qualified based on a taxation definition that was established by the IRS and the Department of Revenue uses. So for instance, it needs to be a capital expense. If you go into an old building and you're converting it to apartments and the only thing you're doing is putting new appliances in, that won't qualify because that's equipment, it's not a capital improvement. So there's certain things that are qualified and unqualified. In general, with historic buildings, you're looking at the footprint of the building itself and work on that building, site work, which isn't such a big deal when you're in a downtown, but site work is something that doesn't ordinarily qualify. If you've got let's say you have a house and it's a really old house and it doesn't, have an appropriate restroom and you've got to make an addition to it, great, there's a way to do that and meet the preservation requirements, but you're expanding the footprint, so that work on new construction won't qualify. It's really aimed at historic preservation, and it's aimed at projects that impact the building.
There's strategies for it. So if you had to put an elevator in a downtown building, sometimes it's easier to do an addition but you wouldn't get tax credits on that. But if you put it internally, you would. So there's certain strategies that can help the bottom line on that a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna do an example.
Tiny text. I'm glad everybody has the printout.
Yeah.
All right.
Just kind of to walk through, to help understand the historic tax credits. This is development cost, what it would cost to buy a building, all the different soft costs that come up, and then we've got on there for the actual rehabilitation about 1.8 million. So we're assuming about 8,000 square foot building, $225 a square foot on that kind of project. So putting it, $2.7 million, which sounds like that's crazy numbers, right? But toilets cost the same in Marion as they do in Kansas City. They just do. And that's one of the great things about the tax credits. So, listed on here, we've got everything that you're gonna see on a project, appraisal cost, construction interest, all those things. It adds up. What we've done on this next one is look at what you can get from a federal and a state tax credit on that giant $2.7 million project. And we've looked at it like how much of it would equal to QRE. So what minus the appliances, there's all these little things that don't count, right? So about $438,000 in federal tax credits, and then almost $900,000 in state. So almost $1.3 million in tax credits, which is, that's almost 50%, right? And if you look at the top, there's the formula we put in there, and you'll see something that's called sale amount. That's the amount that, kind of the going rate. So if I'm selling tax credits to Central National Bank, they're buying them at 92 cents on the dollar or something like that. The federal ones, you can't sell, they can be syndicated, which is a fancy lawyer term for selling them, essentially. But those sell at a lower rate, about 80 cents on the dollar.
So federal credits are allocated based on an ownership percentage, so you actually, if you're bringing on somebody who wants to, who has that kind of liability, then they have ownership in the project, and it can be a challenge, especially when you're working on small town projects, because, you're not gonna have the returns that you might on an urban project, or on a really large project, so it's just something to keep in mind.
But depending on your bank, I know there's some regional banks that do look at that in terms of the appraisal. They'll appraise the tax credit value. So we know the issue in most small towns is, hey, when you do a commercial appraisal, they're looking at sales approach, income approach, cost approach. And they do kind of a average of those three. And so it never hits what the cost is. It's always too low. When you add in the value of the tax credits, it can help get you over that hump.
Helps leverage the financing, yeah, it gives you, more value at the end. Okay, I have to say it then, because these numbers are not from my project, but that photo is, that's the bank building in, James? Bank building in downtown Council Grove, that's the kitchen, and every time we go in there, my husband says, why can't we live here? And I say, because we can't afford to live here. But beautiful project that Ben and his team helped on, and took a building that was mostly vacant for 40 years and rehabbed it. So it was a challenge, but beautiful project, fun project.
Well, and when you start to look at some of those numbers, so we've got on here what I would assume the appraisal would come in at on a construction cost like that. It'd probably come in low and come in at 1.6 million. And most banks will do 80% loan to value on that. So you could only get on your permanent loan 1.3 million. And with the tax credits though, they would again do an 80% loan to value on those. So you couldn't get money up front on the whole value. You would get to 2.3 million.
Helps you bridge that financing gap.
Right. So then what you have to put in, and the bank's gonna make you put in 20% of the total project anyway, you're over, what you gotta have. And that's the beauty on this. It really helps get you there. And that's without any of the other incentives that are a huge deal. This is just one tool. Because, you know, RHID is huge. Industrial revenue bond is huge for these kind of projects too. We use
Neighborhood
those in,
revitalization program.
yeah.
That helps them out too.
And I know in town you've done some CDBG projects before in the downtown. Those are great, and they've upped the amount on those as well, so that they're at 300,000 instead of 250,000. But all those components can help bridge that gap, because depending on the bank that you're working with, some of those might see the grant as cash, some of them might not. It just depends on their risk tolerance. Okay. So,
The gun did.
yeah, this is the Gundam. So on the left, that was a non-contributor in the Emporia Downtown Historic District. They took off the siding and all that, and underneath was this brick facade. The glass wasn't there or anything, but once the brick got exposed, they switched it from being a non-contributor to a contributor.
Gun den?
Yeah.
Gun den?
Yeah,
They sold
it
guns.
was.
Yeah, in downtown Emporia.
That's what it was. Now it's a doctor's office.
You gotta hire somewhere.
He got a lot of tax credits. He didn't get tax credits for pulling the stuff off, but he got it on the rest of the project, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
We've also worked on some other projects with, I've worked on several where there were facades, and it's pretty amazing, when these things come down, you just never know what you're gonna find, and sometimes you get really lucky.
Yeah, this was not what we expected. We thought it was on, like, stuccoed on the masonry, and it was gonna be a nightmare, and they pulled that off, and like, oh.
I've done it where it did have stucco on the masonry, and we had to take it off. Ooh.
Yeah.
Is this on Main Street, or what is it?
Yeah,
Fortune?
on commercial, in Emporia. That's what, 900 block?
In the 700 block.
700, yeah, okay.
I think it's now Dr. Waters has an office there,
That's right.
and a kin person, kin doctor or somebody else.
708.
So next steps. What are the next steps? After tonight's meeting, we're gonna meet with SHPO about the boundary. We're gonna hear from you guys here in a second on what we all think. And then we're gonna go through these steps. And we're gonna have another public meeting at some point as well to, because it always takes a while to digest things. People come back with different questions, that type of thing. So we really want to hear from you all and ask the questions, because it's important to know what questions there are so we can help you guys understand. Because in my experience, it is important in a small community to have a historic district, because it just helps financially. For a project cash flow, you really have to have it. I think we're to questions. Yes, sir.
So if I, and I don't, but if I had a non-contributing building within the boundaries of the district, what's the downside for me, other than the liability of the district?
There is no, in my opinion, no downside. When a building permit is pulled, it still goes to the state for a state law review, no matter what.
But you're probably, I mean, depending on what requires a permit, you're probably dealing with that anyway, because they're individually, well, I guess, they don't really matter.
Yeah. So.
We've probably dealt with that in the past.
And again, if something would come up, that's where the city council could say, hey, no, we're still doing this. But on a non-contributor, it's usually a 30-second review.
And usually it's with work on an exterior. I mean, they're not gonna be concerned about what happens on the inside, because the idea is the impact on the district as a whole.
And we just did a project in Emporia Police Station, in the Civic Auditorium in the basement. And it is drop ceilings, it was mechanical units, it was bulletproof glass, it was cabinets. That was a historic project, completely approved. It was not doing anything different than here, because that's the condition they were dealing with to start with. So that's always something
you're saying that it doesn't mean that you have to put in historic doorknobs on every floor or whatever.
You're only gonna get, so you can decide, hey, we're not applying for any of this funding, right? We're gonna do it our way. If you're doing a project that doesn't require a permit, which is probably a lot of projects in Marion, I would guess. I mean, I live in Cottonwood Falls. We built a laundromat without a permit. But anyway, well, no, I mean, it just, but there wasn't the same plan review. But doorknob, and that's not the kind of thing that's gonna tip off, a permit and tip off a review. But if you have a contributor and you want to qualify for the tax credits, then you're gonna want a project that meets the standards, so that you get tax credits, but those will be reviewed.
And I was just trying to say that you can get tax, like, to this space, this was renovated. You can get tax credits on this going back with like materials that are here.
Ben, on that example of the 40 PD, did you get money back?
Yes, 30%
Of how much of the
It was
project?
about $250,000.
Okay. I know 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they put air conditioning in the gym, and that was all above the ceiling, about $500,000. I have the number, but it used to be 25%.
Yep.
When it was all said and done, the city spent $500,000, we pre-certified it, we got 125 back in tax credits, sold them at 92%, we got about 115,000 cash, simply because Casey Woods, who came over here one day, told us to fill out a form.
Yeah.
And that was what the
Those are the easiest projects,
That was
yeah.
that's
Electrical,
one thing I've
HVAC.
spent my whole life for a lot of money.
And I would just point out for local governments, the state historic tax credits are a great tool that way. You only have to spend more than $5,000 to meet that threshold.
Which is everything.
That's everything. Air conditioner goes out, you can do it. And it's not complicated to do. The federal one, it's a little more challenging
Yeah.
to get done. Typically, you have to spend more than what you purchased the building for. So it's gotta be a substantial project typically.
Yeah. And also, it's for income producing properties only. So, yeah, with municipal, you're looking at, state credits. And that's also now, so here, because you're a town that's under 9,500, it would also be 40%.
Going off of that with the non-contributing ones, so is there any negative or drawbacks to someone within the boundaries that's doing new construction? There wouldn't be any restrictions on that so much?
If it requires a permit that's in the boundaries of the district, it would get reviewed under the state preservation statute. But that's what we're talking about with local control.
They're not getting money anyway.
Usually when somebody's doing a new building within a downtown historic district, they're gonna do something that is consistent with that district, right? Because there's value in that for the community. But if you wanted to do something nuts, that somebody said no, it gets appealed, if it gets reviewed, because you're in a district boundary and it requires a permit, it can be appealed to the local governing body and they make the final decision.
I would just, again, point to Emporia, but there's been several downtown infill projects there that have happened. The Corey Hague's multifamily projects, I mean, they're all in the historic district, so.
And there's always a way to do it in a consistent manner.
I just know there's any major drawback if someone was willing to build something there as a new construction, that would be the only thing.
When you qualify for funding, you would get reviewed if you're in the boundaries, but in that case, because you're not getting funding, it can be appealed back to the local governing body.
So, like on that boundary where you said that could be done different, like going up Main Street, could you extend it to get like the museum and like the Hill School building and the brick building in there?
Do we want to go back to the
Yeah, we can go back to that.
map?
So when we did survey a broad area. The proposed boundary that we came up with in 2019 was based on like a preponderance of contributors. That's probably gonna need to be reevaluated. I will say, you mentioned the school building, I mean, it depends on the nature of the district. Usually with a downtown historic district, you're really focused on commercial buildings and you're not likely to pull in a school building, although we did it in Emporia. We were able to get that.
Christie, the only challenge to that is the Hill building is already on the national register.
Oh, it's individually listed, okay, all right.
So, to to Kevin's question, extending on up the hill to the high school building, there may be some value in that because of, you know, the way things get. But I
There's
know the school
possibilities
districts.
there, I will say, in general, we try to focus on commercial districts,
Sure.
but I made a case in Emporia, when I did the downtown district there, we wanted Lowther North and Lowther South to be included, those are the two huge school buildings that are on Sixth Street, because there were major redevelopments being planned, and it was easier just to kind of pull it all together, and I fought on that one, and we got it.
I think the school board has already been, I think they've already used some historic tax
Right.
credits in some of the things they've done with the Hill building.
It's a great building.
I think one thing, like, just for reference, when we're talking about the district, if we were just to include the museum is like here. So we would we just go down
It's
the
already
street
listed
and
though.
include
It's
the
listed
museum.
too, isn't it?
The museum is, I'm not sure.
The church, the old church building.
Yeah.
It's individually listed,
Maybe it is.
cause I was in there not too long, yeah,
Like
we
that
can check it.
stone building
I'm
is
gonna
just
check.
up the hill, cause I mean, I know from reading in the paper, the school has to do something heat-wise, cause it's like.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Yeah, so
So
we,
then they couldn't use the tax credits, but they could sell them as a school district.
exactly, and I'll
Yeah.
tell you, if you ever wanna see a community that knows how to use these for schools, Independence, Kansas, they basically rehab all of their historic school buildings, and made a choice to rehab those instead of building new because of the tax credits, and they've sold them.
But I think what you're saying, I want to make sure I'm right, is that since the Hill building at least is already on the register, they can have access to these anyways.
It's already eligible.
But the high school building's not.
I talked to Justin today, and whether or not they were interested in us trying to pull them in, and he said they weren't.
It also, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't preclude their listing it individually in the future. There's a lot more schools that are being listed now because that credit went from 25% to 40%. It makes a difference when you're making choices, it makes a difference.
So we need to find out whether or not the museum got the register.
I'm looking right now. You don't think it is?
The museum
Yeah.
on the state historic register, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
No, it's
Okay,
not.
I'm gonna do.
I have another question when you get a minute.
Okay, so these are the property, there are 9, just for fun, there are 9 buildings in Marion that are listed. One is Bound Corby School. That was a historic tax credit project, okay? Donaldson Hosmer Building, the Elgin Hotel, I was the consultant on that, when that was rehabbed. First Presbyterian Church, Hill Grade School. There's an archaeological district. Marion County, that's outside of town, but Marion County Courthouse. Marion County Park and Lake, so that was a New Deal era thing, and that's a more of a structured thing. Marion County, Poor Farms. So those are the properties that are listed and would already be eligible. So I'm surprised.
Yeah,
that
it
it's
just
not-
never has been.
That is a beautiful, the interior of
Yeah.
that building is just gorgeous
Yeah.
too. That would be something to look at. I know when we did, so I've done, I don't know how many of these, a lot. When we did Emporia, we did have churches that were included kind of within that commercial business district, because historically with Emporia, it was very focused around Sixth Street, and then in the early 20th century, ESU went gangbusters when they, the Kansas State Teachers College. And so downtown started marching north. Well, there were residential neighborhoods with churches. The churches remained, the homes were moved, and so they were kind of integrated into that business district, and we included them as contributors when we listed that one. Same thing in, anyway, same thing in some other.
We've got a historic home that is just south of the west end of the district.
Okay.
It recently sold. I don't believe that the people that bought it are going to use it as a private residence. But it's a very historic site, and I wondered about bringing that in.
I think it's worth looking at. It is just a huge challenge when you start cherry picking individual houses on the
Sure.
outskirts of it.
It's
Especially
just-
when it is.
If you look where it's
commercial.
located,
Yeah.
it's just right there.
It's certainly something we could look at. The truth is, we probably surveyed it, because I know we inched a little beyond, the boundaries, but, I'm just saying, ordinarily, we're making a justification to the State Preservation Office, and generally with commercial districts, there are rare exceptions, but, you know, if it's well within the boundaries and it makes sense, yes, but if it's on the outskirts, it's like, then which houses do you choose?
No, there's no other homes around there.
And it doesn't, and you can't, just so you know.
The Billings place.
You
Yes.
can also, many communities, I mean, I'm thinking of Newton. Newton has large residential historic districts.
Right.
I did the original survey for that and did the nominations for those, so you can have residential districts as well.
Right, yeah. It's just, you know, it was one of our first settlers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth looking at, I don't wanna give you false hope.
Yeah.
Well, the property I'd like to, is just north of Darren's office. That's a vacant house that's, it needs a lot of work, and it may not be saved unless there's something like that could be done. And
So could, maybe, I mean, I know we've been working with Mark, if that's something Mark could give us a list, if folks have particular properties they're interested in, we can look at them and see if they've been surveyed and kind of give you an idea. It's just, I just don't wanna promise, you know.
right, I'd just
I
like
don't
it to
wanna
be
promise them
considered on the
deliver.
list, because
It's
it's so
absolutely
prominent
worth-
right from the park. And
Always
Well,
worth
well,
looking
we-
at, always worth looking at.
I've got no problem when we're talking to SHPO to talk about, hey, here's 3, what do you guys think, that type of thing, and get their
And we'll make,
feedback.
the
there's a
best
church
case.
right next to it that
Yeah,
might be their
we'll make the
advantage.
best case we can, if they have, you know,
Yeah. I just wanna throw it out because it's, I wouldn't wanna, it'd be sad.
Yeah,
if
that's
it's
the best
impossible.
kind of problem you could have, that more people want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The old Billings place actually used to have a community park around it. I mean, yeah, it's worth you looking at.
Okay, we'll look at, I'm trying to remember, I'm sure that I
You
know.
can't see it hardly from the street.
Okay, I might know the building if I saw it, but I don't.
It's a 2-story stone house
It's
south
not,
of
it's not
Main Street.
visible from the street.
Okay,
You have to,
then I apologize.
It's-
Mark.
Actually,
you
it is,
could be.
It is kind of.
because they
Okay.
cleaned it up.
Okay, so I guess if Mark, you would help us kind of make a list of things that people are interested in, just so that we can give you a take on it and answer those questions.
I do have one more question though. If we add anything, do we have to redo anything that we've already done?
What do you mean?
In the process, would it back us up timeline wise?
As far as a rehab project or?
As far as the
expanding the
timeline is just progressing.
We'd have to survey those buildings that we didn't survey.
What I'm saying is, let's find out what they are, because it's possible, I know that we surveyed a couple residential buildings just because they were in the way, right? They're kind of surrounded. We need to find out if they've been surveyed, and then we need to do an analysis.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was gonna set us back a year or something.
Well,
You
I
know?
mean, there's gonna be some update that needs to happen.
Okay.
And so the question is whether we surveyed it or not, and what that looks like, and whether we think we can justify it within the boundaries.
Thank you.
You guys have any
Those are great problems. Can we have
Any
more?
tax credit questions or anything like that to help understand how those work, or?
So does the Department of Revenue assist in selling those to?
No. If you have a project that is under $1 million, then the numbers are reviewed by the preservation office to review all that. If you have a larger project, you submit schedules where they look at your expenses, and Department of Revenue does look at those for those larger projects. And usually what they're looking for is making sure you're not claiming stuff that's not, that's not an
It's
eligible
in the
expense.
right column.
Yes, and, I guess my advice on that is, as long as you're upfront and honest and got all the information, then usually aren't gonna have a problem.
All right. Thank you.
Quiet crowd. I have a question. Okay, how many of you own buildings in downtown? It's a handful. How many are gonna buy buildings after this meeting?
There's some that are for sale.
So it's about half and half. Yeah.
There are a couple that are in, this could help them go over the
Yeah.
hump to sell.
Yeah, and it is a matter of whether the building makes it or not, right? I mean, that was the case with my building in Council Grove. I mean, it had been vacant for a very long time. And, yeah, your downtown's a lot more interesting if you can save those places. I think people are looking, there's marketability and authenticity, you know, small town life, actual community. I mean, that's why I live in a small town. So there's value in that, and people are interested.
Generational thing too, people under 30.
Young people like us.
With the upper story housing,
Yeah.
super popular.
Yeah, they want something they can't, you know, anybody can go to Manhattan and get a Cracker Box apartment, but, yeah, people like to have that character, so.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
We'll be